So one topic that's always interested me is whether or not serial killers are born or created. I've always been really interested in shows like Criminal Minds, Law and Orders, murder mystery novels. I just finished one today, and things of that sort. So it's always really piqued my interest because you see these people that are so evil, and you wonder if they are inherently bad people or if they have traumatic upbringings that lead them to this state that they are in. So I had to Google some small questions to answer my overarching question that's non-Googleable. And so I started with just, can home life affect whether or not people grow up to be serial killers? So many serial killers are survivors of childhood trauma, whether that be physical, emotional, family dysfunctions, distant or abusive parents, just things of that nature. And most examples of serial killers had a rough childhood. And one example of that is Ted Bundy. So we know Ted Bundy was sent through foster care. He had a bad relationship with his stepfather. He never knew his biological mother, and she refused to meet him. Just many things of this sort. And a psychiatric worker and expert on human studies at Harvard even said that trauma is the single recurring theme in the biographies of most killers. So like we said about Ted Bundy, this was a prime example of that. And Radford University study looked at the childhood experiences of 50 serial killers and discovered that 68% of them had experienced some form of maltreatment, whether that had been physical, sexual, psychological neglect, like I had aforementioned. So then my next question was, are there a common theme in serial killers? Because most serial killers, they're saying, have had these troubles at home, but what are other themes amongst them? So one of them was that most of them have personality disorders, which I could have gathered that. According to a statement that the FBI conducted, typical ones are psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder. So the impulse control and emotional centers of their brains are just underdeveloped, and they don't have that same sense of resistance that typical humans do. Also, they're very manipulative and they're very believable. I mean, it's very hard to tell that you are being manipulative. They display a sensation-seeking behaviors. So sometimes they will kill something just to feel something. So a 1965 experiment conducted by criminal psychologist Robert Hare found that psychopaths had this sense of almost like a bring it on type thing. So he put them in chairs, hooked them up to something that measured their pulse and made a countdown. They said at the end of the countdown, you'll receive a painful kind of shock. And all serial killers showed no signs of a raise in beats per minute, whereas normal people that they conducted the experiment on obviously had heightened anxiety levels when the timer was going down, but these people that they knew were serial killers did not. Also, they are often trying to fill an emotional void. So people who feel helpless in their own lives tend to try to look to belittle others and to try to feel control over someone else's lives or someone else's emotions to regain that power. And serial killers are often described as emotionally vacant and unable to form meaningful personal relationships. So you rarely ever see them in relationships with partners or good family relationships. Although Ted Bundy was an exception to this, which is very interesting. Just brings up more points. And then my final question was, are there patterns in the brains of serial killers that are different from typical human brain patterns? So at the front of your brain is your orbital cortex, and this is what controls your reasoning, your decision making, your impulse control, all of that what makes a normal functioning human. So neuroscientists have concluded that serial killers have orbital cortex issues, and their orbitofrontal cortices are maladaptive. So basically they're just underformed and they're not functioning, not firing on all cylinders like normal people. So basically serial killers have less impulse control than the average person and tend to act more sporadically, which would make sense as to why they just up and kill people for no reason, because that's another thing with serial killers, is that they don't have to have a reason to kill. They will just do it. They don't have to have a motive or anything. So my final claim is that I do believe serial killers are made and not born. And my research led me to this conclusion because although they may have some brain abnormalities, that doesn't automatically translate to becoming a serial killer. I mean, you can have impulse control problems and not decide to just kill people. So do trauma and neglect and illnesses like make the situation worse? Yes, I believe so. And I believe that it is that malnurturing that leads to someone becoming just evil. And then already having these pre-existing brain disorders does not help. And also, not all people who are categorized as psychopaths are categorized as serial killers, because they're a whole different breed. So everyone that is a serial killer is a psychopath, but not all psychopaths are serial killers, because psychopaths do actually have that need for a motive to kill, which is why I believe overall that they are created and not born.